All right. So welcome everybody. My name is Albert, and this is the second, webinar we are having for the FinOps series. So the first one we had in November that was about inform phase, and this is the one we are having about optimize phase. Right. So this is the poster that we shared on all the social media platforms and on emails for this particular webinar. Uh, again, the agenda is more or less similar to what we had in the first webinar for inform phase, except we will be doing a deep dive on optimize phase, which, in my personal opinion, is something that everybody wants. How do I optimize, my costs, and especially when we see all these layoffs globally, going on for enterprises, startups. I mean, you name it. And I think it becomes very important to focus on, hey, how do I optimize my cost on cloud? And I think that is what we are going to do today. A quick walkthrough about Love's Cloud. So founded in 2017, we build SaaS for cloud management for Azure and Microsoft 365. At the end of the session, I'm going to give you a quick walkthrough of that product. Just one page, the dashboard that we have developed. We also give FinOps solution, and then for the last 5 years, we have saved a lot of money to a lot of customers across globe on cloud solutions. I have with me Dwayne Munro. He's a senior cloud architect at CloudReach. Amazing credentials. And then we've been, Dwayne and I've been talking on and discussing on a lot of cloud-related issues for last 1.5 years. And he's been very kind to take out time today. He's very occupied today, as a matter of fact. So thank you, Dwayne, for coming out and spending time to share your knowledge with the community. You want to talk a little bit about yourself, Dwayne? I know you do a lot of work for AI also, for cloud as well, for FinOps as well, and in general enterprise architect as well. Please talk about yourself.
Yes. Thanks, Albert. So, my name is Dwayne Monroe. As Albert mentioned, I'm a senior cloud architect for the company CloudReach. I have been with that company for about 4 years. But prior to that, a number of roles, primarily on premises. I pivoted my career rather decisively to cloud, I'd say around 10 years ago, when AWS became a more mature offering and companies were beginning to migrate their workloads to that platform. And then I decided around 4 years ago or so to focus in more precisely on Azure because my on-premises experience was primarily with the Microsoft stack, deployed at scale in categories of companies such as pharmaceuticals, energy, government, military, and so forth. So once Azure became an actual competitor to AWS, it was logical for me to decide to focus on that platform. And as Albert mentioned, I do write quite a bit about FinOps as it relates to the Azure platform specifically. So you see that information on the screen, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you very much. And so Dwayne has written a book. You can find that on his blog, and you can see on the information, on the screen. He also make very informative blogs. He write those blogs on his website, and I think for me personally and for my team, great source of information, right? Hands-on information with experience, with actionable insights. I think that is exactly what you need. And there are a couple of other things that I want to mention about Dwayne. So Dwayne also runs like various channels, like a Twitter and a FinOps Discord. And the objective of these channels are that he wants to promote cloud, he wants to promote FinOps solutions, that you have. So if that is something that you are interested in, Dwayne is the person to kind of go to. Right. Okay, me, I am founder and CEO of Loves Cloud. I'm a solution architect. I used to do training, on cloud, DevOps, project management, and then of late FinOps as well. I have authored a book uh, on AWS security in 2017. And yes, this webinar is about education, sharing our knowledge with the community about FinOps, and we'll talk a little bit about why everybody is so much interested in FinOps, right? So that this is the objective of the webinar. If you have any questions, put it on the chat window, and then either Dwayne or I will pick up, right? So, Dwayne, let me ask you this, and I think the last time also I asked the same question. Why is FinOps gaining momentum in the first place? Like, why do we see on LinkedIn, on Twitter, so many people or so many posts that mention FinOps, in last few months? Why is that?
I think that the reason is because um, the level of spending on cloud that is occurring within enterprises of all sizes, but particularly enterprises, very large enterprises, has grown to what financial people call material levels. And when they say that, what they mean is, let's say you're a Fortune 500 firm, and there's a line item for $1,000, €1,000, or whatever currency, something that seems minor. They want to be aware of that, but that's not a material spend. It has no impact upon revenue and upon
Right.
profits.
Right.
But if the spend is in the millions or the hundreds of
Yes.
millions or
Yes.
whatever, gets the attention of finance, they say, oh, we're spending so much on this particular thing that now we have to calculate this relative to our revenue, to our profits. That's when it gets finance's attention. And so
Yeah.
that is what has inspired and been the impetus, I would say, for FinOps, which has existed for a little while, but was sort of treated as, I don't know, someone that you don't pay attention to
Yes.
during the gold rush phase of cloud. But now people are saying, oh yes, I do need to pay attention to that spend, because money isn't infinite, obviously, and
100%.
and everything is metered for spend.
Yes, and on that note, do you also think that there are, and I think you have made a very, very interesting observation, the gold rush period of cloud computing, the phase, and that is where they were moving their workloads from on-premises, data centers to cloud, and then perhaps for a few years, they, how do I put it? They did not worry about the cost because they were expecting that it is going to grow. And
Yes.
then perhaps they used, or somebody used some tools where they found out that, hey, you know what? There are certain reports that in large organization, 30% of your resources are wastage or unused. And
Hmm.
maybe this is something that the finance guy kind of, it rang a bell. Do you
Yes.
think that that would have played some role as well?
Yes, I do think so. With on-premises resources, of course, the spend is, as we know, a capital expenditure, which means,
Yes.
if your budget is 8 million, say US dollars, for computation for the data center, that money is spent, and then it is amortized over however many years the company has decided to, as we used to say when I worked with data centers, sweat the assets,
Yeah.
by which they meant we're going to hold on to these
Right.
servers for as long as the accounting people tell us makes sense for the amortization over time. But with cloud, of course, spend can grow at by orders of magnitude,
Yeah,
and
I
and that
agree.
and
Yeah.
like overnight, and that is unprecedented. Like there was no precedent for that in the past, where if you spent that 8 million, if your that budget was 8 million, there's no way that another department would spend an additional 8 million in a week. That just wasn't
Yeah.
going to happen because you had to order the servers and rack them and stack them, and there's an entire procurement process. It wasn't a matter of developers simply deploying things and then your spending increasing as a result. The other, you mentioned something very interesting, Albert, which was since I've been doing clouds almost since the beginning of cloud becoming a significant factor in IT. I remember when at first Amazon, then later Microsoft, and then Google all said the same thing to their customers or potential customers on the sales end, which was cloud is cheaper.
Yes.
And if you're spending like I consulted at a pharmaceutical firm, and their compute spend, this was in the U.S., their compute spend, their yearly budget was like $40 million. So if someone comes to them and says you can get all of this compute for cheaper, of course they're going to be very excited. So
Yes.
then, whatever the initial cost was of
Yes.
deploying to the cloud, they consider to be an investment in the future. Well, then they've deployed many, many things to a cloud
Yes.
platform, whatever it
Yes.
may be. And then they discover, like, oh, it wasn't cheaper at all.
Yeah.
And what's going on. And so that's why I think the gold rush period has come to an end, because now there's more information. And it's not that it cannot be less expensive, but now you have to work differently and harder to actually determine how to make that happen, how to optimize.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that brings me to another sort of discovery that organizations made, when they move to cloud. Like, for example, there is no such thing as data transfer cost, when you are not on cloud, when you are on premises.
Hmm.
Uh, and in cloud, I mean, if you are an organization that is serving large files, like large media files,
Hmm.
I mean, your data transfer costs would run, I don't know, maybe 20%, 30% of your cloud bill. And that I'm not sure organizations were prepared for that, because that is how
Not at
cloud
all.
works.
Not
Yeah.
at all. And there was no one to prepare them for that,
Yes.
because, like, for example, I'll use the pharmaceutical firm again as an example. So they had multiple data centers in the Philadelphia region, in New York, in California, Los Angeles region, and so forth. And what did you have on those data centers? You had Cisco WAN
Yes.
equipment, and you used
Yes.
MPLS. You used, the classic, very heavy duty networking equipment to create a wide area network between the different sites. Well,
Yes.
what did that cost them? Well, it didn't really. I mean, once they bought, I mean, the Cisco
Yes.
equipment is quite expensive,
Yes.
but once you bought that equipment, then the cost was done. And of course, they would have fiber connections, or as I said, MPLS connections between the sites. So there was no additional cost as a result of that. So yes, no one was talking about networking charges. Certainly not the cloud vendors.
So I think those few items that Dwayne we just discussed, I think they contributed to everybody, uh, you know, talking about FinOps, exploring FinOps, and taking FinOps more seriously. Okay. Now, of course, I like the term that FinOps Foundation uses, that it's an evolving cloud financial management, because there is so much to kind of uncover from organization, from cloud, from the users, the way they work, and then last time we spoke about Inform, that how we can ensure that there are more people involved uh, in sharing of the information, in taking the decision, in taking the steps, and watching what exactly they are consuming and how they are consuming. And this week, this time we are going to talk about the optimized phase. So for everybody, Would you like to explain these three phases briefly, Dwayne?
So as Albert mentioned in the previous uh, webinar that we participated in, we talked about the inform phase, in which is having visibility into the sources of cloud spend. Now, what is that? So that is using either built-in tools, for example. On Azure, the Azure cost management
Cost management. Yeah.
tooling, which is quite good. There's need for other tools, which is Albert has this tool.
Yes.
However, the built-in tool is actually quite good, and it can be used as part of the of visibility. And inform in that case also means informing all the stakeholders, not simply
Yes.
technical personnel or business personnel. Everyone is involved.
Yeah.
Um, Optimize means that now that you have your data, you have your information. So, for example, just recently with a client, I did something quite simple. Using the cost management, I determined that they were not using reserved instances at all.
Wow.
There was like not one, and yet their spend was quite high. Right.
Right. Right.
So part of the optimization for that particular client was to begin to explore those scenarios and those architectures that could benefit from the use on Azure of reserved instances and also um, hybrid benefit since they already had licenses on premises, which they have not been extending to their usage on the cloud. So that's an example of taking the information that you gather in the informed phase and then
Yes.
using that information to optimize. And then of course you see the operate, which means that you do this repeatedly
Yes.
because it's never done.
It's never done. It's never done. I mean, and I'll give you an example. So I told you that we saved like thousands of dollars, for our customers working on cloud. So last year, I think in August, really, August or September, we did the same exercise, doing that you did. So we went to Azure, uh, Azure Advisor, and then we saw that there are recommendations for saving cost, and most of them were through reserve instance recommendation, and we saved close to 32,000, $35,000 per month for a client. And then last week I visited them in our tool, and then I again saw that they have got like few $1,000s of recommendation again. So it is very important for all of us to remember that this is an iterative process. Like we are never done with cost optimization. It's a day in day out thing because cloud is so dynamic. Uh, and I think it's a very very important point to remember that. And what FinOps Foundation also kind of preaches is that it's an iterative thing. You need to do that again and again and again. Dwayne, let us talk about a couple of things at a very, very high level, right? So optimize, if we could, maybe classify it into like two or maybe few more broad categories. I've written only two here. So one is like rate reduction, and then the second one is kind of cost avoidance. Let us start with, how do you go about, let's say, what are some of the two or three things that you would recommend for everybody, uh, for the optimized space? How do you go about it?
Well, as we mentioned a little while ago, certainly for any environments, particularly environments that use IaaS, that is to say virtual machines, it is important to explore, to discover to what extent you can use um, discounts such as, well, you see reservations are there, but also there are discounts that are often available through the vendor, in the
Yes.
case of Azure, Microsoft, that
Yes.
you can negotiate because you're saying we're going to use, and this really comes into play for environments such as, say, a large SAP environment
Yes.
that's
100%.
built,
Yeah.
because you're not going to get rid of that for years. And so it is possible to, say, negotiate with Microsoft in an enterprise agreement and say, we can reduce the run rate of the individual components of this particular architecture that we've deployed that we
Yes.
know, because it's business critical and it needs to be stable, we know that
Exactly.
it's going to exist for at least 3 years, if not longer.
Yes.
Um, Reservations, of course, we've already mentioned, and in which you can save on the run rate, and by run rate I mean the rate at which the bill is calculated as really per
Exactly.
second. You can
Yes.
reduce the run rate by saying, once again, I'm going to use this environment for quite some time. I know that, and so I'm going to do an upfront payment. And then there can be reconciliation often, sometimes at the end of the period, say it's a year for a particular environment. The use of spot instances, which are instances that are not guaranteed to exist,
Right.
but they can be made available, virtual machines typically.
Yes.
Um, um, and you would build your environment, and here's where architecture comes into play quite significantly, because you would architect that environment to scale horizontally so that the
Yes.
spot instances that you're using within that you've chosen to be used within that particular architecture, if you lose instances, it doesn't bring the actual service down. Um,
Yeah.
Cost avoidance is, of course, waste reduction. What is an example of waste? Well, let's say that the dev team has spun up a number of resources that they no longer need, and those resources are still running. They
Yeah.
may even be shut down, but perhaps they are still generating bills because there's still disks and network connections associated with them.
Yes.
Um, the use of scheduling of automation for deployments and for shutdowns, for example, is very critical.
All right.
These things,
Please carry on. Yeah. So I think uh, waste reduction is something that I have read and I've found out it is termed as kind of low-hanging fruit. And I think what you mentioned a couple of slides ago, Dwayne, that if we look at Azure cost management, tool, which Azure provides, I think that's a very good place to see where you are spending money. And we'll come to tagging a little later. But then at least you find out that where you are spending money. So this is a virtual machine, and then this machine is costing me $1,000, a month. I think Azure cost management is our first, step, Dwayne, where we at least find out that where our money is being spent, and then that's where we could perhaps relate it to the waste reduction stuff.
yes,
I think when we have Azure cost management, we can find out what are some of the resources that are kind of a low hanging fruit, which are generating cost, but they are not being used. And I think the Azure Advisor is the second thing where I would want to go to find out about the right sizing, or maybe
mhm.
shutting down something. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, those are certainly good places to start. And yeah, as I was saying, with the cost management tool, you can see the categories of resources that are generating spend and to what percentage of your overall spend they're doing it. And that's a good way to start the investigation, because then you can say, oh, we're spending X number of whatever on blob storage, and I didn't even know we had that much blob storage. Like there's
Yeah.
things like that that you can discover, and it's also a good security tool. Just as an aside, because if there's resources showing up in your environment, they have to generate cost, and that's something that a hacker or an intruder can't hide. So it's also a way of discovering everything that's going on within the environment. So just as uh, another benefit.
Okay. Now the next one, which I think we discussed a little bit in our last webinar as well, and I think this is something that all the organization should be aiming for. So when we start on a FinOps journey, there should be some goals, and in order to reach those goals, there should be some metrics, some KPIs that they should be, monitoring. Uh, and then there are few things which I really want to talk about. So tagging, for example, and for some reason, tagging is not taken very seriously. To be very honest, what is your experience and recommendation for tagging?
You're absolutely right. It's very common for organizations to not properly tag their resources. And then sometimes resources will be tagged, but they'll be tagged only for technical purposes, say for automation, which is good.
Yes. Yeah.
But cloud platforms, certainly Azure, support multi-dimensional tagging.
Yes.
So I can tag for production or development. I can tag for department. I can tag for project. I can apply many tags and accomplish many things with those tags. Tagging for business purposes is important for a FinOps perspective because it enables you to then be able to tie the use of the cloud resources to the business purpose. And this actually helps, say, finance and accounting and technologists determine whether or not the spending that is occurring is the term that people in finance will use is it the spend performing?
Yes.
Because if you spend 1 million, but because of, let's say it's a web platform that you're selling sneakers through and you're earning 2 million a month, but you're spending 1 million a month, well, that's
Yes.
good. You like to make even more, of course, but
Yes.
at least you know that you're not that the spending is productive for the organization. And but you can also determine the opposite, and so on and so forth. Tagging is, as you were saying, Albert, it's extremely powerful, but often not used.
Yes, and I think this is something that we discussed at length in our last in our previous webinar, and I do see like uh, customers where 34% of resources, or the resources that contribute 34% of cost, uh, they are untapped, and it simply means that nobody knows who kind of own those uh, those resources, uh, and if there is no accountability, I mean, who is going to do something about it? uh, so I think that is kind of really very important. The second one is the reserve instances and the savings plan coverage, right? So how do you see that? And I'll give you one example. Like, I think this happened last week. So I was preparing an RI coverage report for a client, and they are spending excess of $150,000 on Azure per month. And their RI coverage was a total of 66%, 60, yeah, less than six, well, 66 point something. And what was fascinating was they purchased a lot of 3-year RI, and the utilization was 0% for some of them. Uh, have you seen something like that? And how do you handle that? To be very honest, for those organizations, what do you recommend?
Well, I think the thing to do is to show, and show the potential benefit.
Yes.
And this can be done using the Azure pricing calculator.
Yes.
That is actually a fairly capable tool. It derives its information from the billing. I'm sorry, the rate sheet API, not the billing API. And which is good because it means that it's pretty up to date regarding what the pricing is for various services that are offered on Azure. And so I create scenarios in which I take their existing environment, and then I plug those elements into the pricing calculator, and then produce reports saying, if you were to choose the following benefits, if you were to use reserved instances, these are the savings that you could experience.
Yes.
So then, you have the current state and the better future state from a spending perspective, and that seems typically that does get people to pay attention.
Yes. Yes. And I think as part of the goals that we want to achieve as an organization, if these two KPIs are shared with entire organization, and every organization will have some departments like sub organization sort of thing, or a business unit, and they would know that this particular business unit has a RI coverage of 85% versus this one has 66%. I think that's a very good metric for them to kind of up their game, for the RI.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And also I think you did mention earlier that there is something like committed use discount, and there is an hybrid uh, uh, you know uh, how do I put it, hybrid mode as well, where you already have licenses
Mm-hmm.
and you can take those licenses in there. I think a lot of people don't know and don't use those things. Talk a little bit about
Mm-hmm.
that hybrid mode, please.
So the Microsoft offers a benefit to customers called hybrid use benefit, and using that particular instrument, which is a kind of an extension of already spent licensing to the cloud, you can experience some rather significant savings. It can be
Yes.
extended to resources such as, say, the use of SQL Server, Azure SQL, within the cloud. Certainly to SQL instances that may be deployed. Perhaps you have no choice and you have to deploy it on the virtual machine, which is not ideal, but there are situations in which it calls for that, or to use a managed instance for SQL, for example, which pretends that it's installed on a virtual machine. Um, this allows you to use your already the spending that you've already made with licensing for on-premises resources, and then extend that to a fairly good degree to the cloud. And Microsoft put this in place, obviously, to encourage their customers to migrate workloads.
Yes.
Um, and there's no reason to not take advantage of it.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so it's something that is often not used, and like reserved instances, is often not used or not used intelligently. And so that's also something that I always recommend to customers, particularly those that have a very large investment
Yes.
on
Yes.
premises in the
Yes.
Microsoft stack.
Right. Right. No, I understand that, and I think uh, uh, that kind of brings to the last item in this particular slide, upgrade to current generation instances, and I think this is
Hmm.
where for a lot of compute, and in many cases,
Hmm.
one could save like 25% of the cost and improve the performance as well.
Hmm.
Have you encountered that with any of during your consulting assignments?
Yes, and when it comes to this particular situation, this shows the kind of emerging of architectural
Yes.
ability
Yes.
with an understanding of what savings are possible. Because, of
Yes.
course, upgrading to a current generation instance is typically always a good idea, but there may be reasons, to not do so. And so you have to be very aware of all of the factors that are relevant to the decision. But
Yes.
um, but this is something that I always investigate. These items that are on the list here, all these items are things that I always investigate when I work with the client to see to what extent they can be used or deployed for the client's environment. Um, and it is possible to experience very significant savings.
100%. I completely agree on that. So these are some of the items that we discussed last time as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And these are some free resources for AWS and Azure.
Mm-hmm.
I want to share my screen for a tool that we have, the PowerPoint. You are aware of that, our Azure management tool, and I want to kind of walk us through that and talk a little bit about. Let me just quickly share my screen again. Let's see. Okay. All right. Now, so pretty much everything that we spoke about, Dwayne, right? I want to talk. So this is for one of our client. They spend close to $30,000, and this is one of our dashboard. And I want to kind of share a few things. For example, there is something called estimated monthly savings, and you could see here that they already have $6,000 of monthly savings, estimated monthly saving based only on Azure Advisor cost recommendations, right? Which is like 20% of their monthly cost. They spend like 23 to 20, well, $30,000, approximately $30,000. And do you think that a tool like this would be helpful for an organization?
Yes, absolutely. And this is a burgeoning area of tooling. And even looking at the interface here, you can see that at a glance, of course, it gives you, information that, say, business people, security people, finance people would find, and technical people, of course, would find of use. We've talked about the built-in tooling for
Right,
Azure.
right.
However, there is, as I said, a growing market for this type of tooling, and the reason is because there's more information available from the APIs of the
Yes,
platform than
yes,
the built-in tooling is
right.
making is showing you.
Yeah, yeah,
And Microsoft, and this is also true for Amazon and Google,
yes,
there's only but
yes,
so far that they're going to go with their own tooling. They've
exactly.
made them good introductory level
Right,
tools,
right.
but there's such a rich amount of data, specifically in the cost area, but
Yeah.
in other areas as well. So yes, to answer your question, absolutely, there's value.
Exactly. And I think, so few things that we really, I think we get sort of good feedback from our customers is one of them is like location cost, where sometimes they are amazed to see the data, that why are we spending money in Australia when our entire business is in somewhere else, right? And I think one, because most of the executive, they actually do not log into to Azure and they go into cost, but then when the finance guys or executive, they see or they get report like this, they do ask questions. And then sometimes it might be that I am a dev manager and I might have provisioned something over there and I forgot about it, right? So when you have some scenarios like this, that is where it kind of helps them to find out that, hey, there is something in there that is causing us little bit, but because it's very little, nobody bothers about it, right?
Yes, that's exactly right. And and this is how cloud spends he sneaks up on
Yes,
organizations, and
yes,
why constant monitoring and a dashboard are important. I'll say something else
yeah,
about this
yeah,
dashboard. Business people are already using dashboards.
yes,
Um, SAP Analytics, for example, which tracks business metrics, Tableau. I mean, they're already using tooling like this.
yes,
What
yes,
has been lacking until very, very recently, and I mean like the last couple of years, is tooling that brings cloud metrics into that world
yes.
of
I agree.
visualization.
I agree.
And so this is and it's very important for the reasons that we've already cited. And what's nice about a common tool um, is that everyone can look at it from different views, which you
Yes,
were just saying, Albert.
exactly.
Because as a technical person, I would look at it from one view, and the business person or manager would look at it from another view. But we're all looking at the same data,
Yes,
but simply presented in a different view. And this is what business
exactly.
people are already accustomed to with their
Yes,
business metric tooling. And so to whatever tool a company chooses, um, it's the way to actually present it is as a business intelligence enhancer of tools that they're already using.
Exactly. Exactly. Very good. Yeah, I think so. So that is something that I just wanted to share and then take your opinion about. That what you just mentioned is that you have one dashboard that kind of shares information about multiple stakeholders in an organization, and I think they are all committed to the same thing. How do we get most value out of our cloud spend? How do we continue to optimize the spend? And then, of course, the business value metrics, what you just mentioned, that if I am spending X to get a revenue of Y, how do I continue to optimize that thing? Because I need to kind of be profitable, right? And it should not be growing on my revenue, on my top line. All right. Yeah. So I think that was a very very nice discussion, Dwayne. And again, I think you've been a great great person who comes to us and then shares the knowledge that you have with us. Anything you would like to add in this conversation?
I would only say that whether you decide to focus on FinOps specifically or not, um, I would recommend for your career, as you because I'm sure many people have focused on becoming quite good with cloud technology, whether it's
Yes.
AWS, Azure, or GCP. If you add this knowledge to your toolkit, I'll put it that way, this makes you even more valuable to an
Yes.
organization. And
Yes.
it means that you'll be able to talk not only to technical people, your fellow techies, but also to the business.
Yes.
Um, and this is something I think that will put you in a good situation for years to come. So I do recommend, and also it is not non-technical. It is an extension of the
Yes.
technical skill set
100%.
into the variable spend reality of cloud. In other words, if we ignore this, then we're not really understanding cloud. Even though you may have all the certs and you
Yeah.
may be quite good at Lambda or functions or what have you, if you don't understand this, you don't really fully understand cloud, because the true value proposition of cloud is the ability to right size it and to tune it to the needs of the business in an intelligent and ongoing way.
I agree, and I want to share something. So I've been a project manager for a very long time. So I always used to tell my team members that you would grow really really well in an organization if you are helping organization make money or save money, right? so so if you are doing one of these things, and I think FinOps kind of focuses on that, and that is where if everybody kind of what you just mentioned, it is really not non-technical, right? It is fairly technical. So if they focus on that, I think their career trajectory would be really really good. So yeah, I completely agree with that thing. All right. So I think that is what we have. Dwayne, thank you very much for your time. I sincerely appreciate that. We should have the edited version of this. And then, our team will, of course, be sending the edited version, to you. And then we look forward to having the third and final installment of this webinar series very, very soon. Okay. Thank you very much, Dwayne. Bye bye. Have a nice.
Yes, thank you.
All
Bye
right.
bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye.